Who here considers themselves a teacher? Raise your hand. Who considers themselves a teacher? It's exactly the response I expected. So I have news for you. One person did raise their hand. In a recent BBC, I think it was, I'm not sure, these teachings sort of become a blur. Venerable Children reminded us that we're teaching others 24/7. All the time we're teaching. So this may come as a surprise to you, maybe not, because we may think of teachers just being someone in a professional situation, or a Dharma teacher, a teacher of certain skill like skiing, those kinds of things. But by our behavior, the way we speak and act and interact with others, we are teaching each other all the time. We're influencing each other all the time. So, of course, psychology has a name for this. They've got a name for everything. And this is observational learning, which means it's the process of learning by watching others. We retain the information, and then we later replicate the behaviors that were observed. And this is going on since the time we were born, in this life and every previous life we've ever had. So the example is, think of, how we're taught to wave by our parents. There's certain ways that families wave, and so that little person will start waving like that. And it also plays an important role into how we're socialized, and so we watch, first of all, our caregivers or our parents in the ways that they interact with others. And that's a huge part of our socialization process. So I know for a fact that after I was born, probably days after I was born, because I had the karma to have a mom who was the church organist at the Catholic Church. My siblings and I were immediately hauled off to church, and over time we were taught how to sit quietly and at least look like we're interested in what was going on, but we really developed the skill of how to daydream and completely disconnect from everything that the priest or the nun was saying. On other days, if we sat close to the wall, which was a stucco surface, I'm embarrassed to say we would pick off the stucco, because the choir and the organ were upstairs and we would be watching everyone downstairs, and we'd pick out people that we'd try and hit with their hats. And amazingly, over the many years that we did this, I don't know how many, my brother got better at it than I did. Women had to wear hats when we were growing up in church. And so we had noticed people get a ping on their hat and they'd sort of look around. And it was an old church, so the ceiling starts to fall apart. So there are ways that we have influenced others in positive ways, and ways we have influenced each other in negative ways. That's a given. This whole talk may seem so obvious and like, what's the point? But I think there is a point to this. So I can remember, actually, I don't really remember this. Sometimes you get memories from your family that you were too young to remember. But there's a family story that one time my dad was babysitting me. I think my mom must have been having my brother in the hospital, and my grandma hadn't shown up yet to help with my care. So I was hanging out with my dad, and we were watching TV, and I noticed him go into the kitchen and get something to drink. So I thought, well, that's something I'll do too. I couldn't have been more than 4. Maybe, about 4. So maybe it was my sister who was being born. Anyway, I was watching what he was doing. And so I went to the kitchen and I found the bottle that he got. And I poured this beverage into my drink. And apparently I sat down in front of the TV with my dad and took a big swig of this drink. And it was rye whiskey. So fortunately, he got that away from me right away, but I was coughing and sputtering, and it was not pleasant. And he felt terrible that this was an example he had given to me. This is what you do on a Saturday afternoon. You watch the hockey game, you get a drink, and you sit down with your family. But another really good memory that I have, many memories I have are great about how I was taught and influenced. My maternal grandmother ran a gift shop that was part of the electrical shop that my grandfather and my dad were part of. And I remember going there to visit her, and this was like many, many times over many years. somehow the poorer kids in our town, and there were many poor families, it was a small rural town, and these kids found out about the big heart that my grandmother had. And I would watch these kids come in, and they'd be looking at some of the toys and the gifts. And so my grandmother would go over to them and talk with them. And they were mostly there to get her warm affection. They knew that they would get it from her. But she always made sure that these kids left with something. And so they always did. They always left with a little toy or something that they could give their mom. So every now and then, people will write to the Abbey and they will say, I've got kids, I'm a practicing Buddhist, and I really want to be a good influence for my child. And so should I just go out and find the smallest meditation cushion that's on sale? And should I enforce that they sit with me during meditation and they don't move and we don't speak to each other and we're silent for 30 minutes? That kind of thinking. Maybe we could get a cushion this size, and in the jolly jumper, we could position the child so that they're just hovering above the meditation cushion. So people are very sincere in their questions. How do I influence my child to be adopting what I believe in? And so the answers are very easy. At least I hope I'm giving good advice to my children. But usually what I say is, maybe just set up a cozy place where you meditate. Don't close the door. And before you meditate every day, let your kids know what you're doing. And maybe ask them to be quiet for the next little while. And if they want to, they can come in and sit with you and they can lie down. And maybe you can show them how to make a food offering and invite them, would you like to help me with that? And maybe they might get interested in time with a water bowl offering. And just do things like that are very casual and laid back. And so that they know that going into that space is where you're both quiet and it's peaceful. And that they see that when you come out of that room, you're in probably a much better place than when you went into the room. But I think the most profound teaching that any parent can give their child is just how they interact with them on a day-to-day basis. For example, when you get together at Christmas, is everyone immediately pulling out alcoholic beverages? Are you immediately talking and criticizing the other family members that aren't there at that particular meal? Or are you the Buddhist who actually refrains from drinking because you have taken that precept, and all of your relatives get to see, and your kids see that you're drinking juice? And you're the one person who's refraining from that activity. And when the gossip starts about the other family members, you skillfully turn the conversation to some act of kindness that you read in the newspaper recently. And then how do you handle disputes in your family? I remember lots of occasions where I saw my parents, neither one of them were yellers. That was not it. But I can remember sitting at the dining room table, and, my dad was late for dinner, and that was almost a mortal sin in our family to be late for dinner. And I could tell that my mom was not pleased, and so there would be this tension, that all the kids pick up on. And so not much is said at the meal, and no one knows how to talk about their emotions or what their needs are because we just didn't know that language then. So maybe as a parent, you can start investigating Marshall Rosenberg's nonviolent communication and just talk about, how, what happened at school today. That's conversations that I didn't have with my mom or dad because when I got home from school, my mom was busy teaching piano, so our job was to be quiet. And when my dad got home from work, then it was time to eat dinner, and he was so exhausted from his work day, because he usually worked 6 days a week, sometimes 7, the conversations weren't about what was really going on internally for people, so we didn't learn how to do that. So as a Buddhist parent or any parent, you can really learn these skills, and believe me, your child is watching you in every moment. And that's true for all of us. So, on the playground, you probably remember watching the cool kids. They were influencing you. When we went to high school, same thing. College, university, same thing. We're watching the cool kids, or we're watching the people, eventually we have some wisdom seeping in. We're watching the people that we think are wise, or who seem to be very caring and kind people. And so as practitioners of any kind of religion, I think it's really important to be aware of how we influence others and not to devolve into this kind of self-conscious, self-centered kind of thinking where we're wondering about our every move and action, but just to let that awareness really fuel, the fact that, hey, maybe you've taken the 5 precepts, and maybe at work someone has just learned you're a Buddhist, and maybe you're in a town where there are no Buddhists, and it's probably best if you're not a closet Buddhist, because it would be great for people to know, maybe they might be curious about what Buddhism is all about. And I remember when I started getting interested in Buddhism, and I would go to a retreat at Cloud Mountain, I would come back to my teaching job, and I would tell people what I was doing in the break time, and they were all honestly, sincerely interested in knowing what I was learning. And then I can remember the first time at a family gathering, there was a spider on the wall, and someone was saying, "Grab the fly swatter, somebody kill it, quick, hurry." So I walked over and I said, wait a second. So I just, scooped it up with a piece of paper, took it outside, and that was like, the whole room went silent for about 3 minutes. Like, huh? What? And then I learned later that my sister adopted this practice, and she started doing it at the medical clinic, and it was the same reaction, like, "Cheryl, what are you doing?" And they would ask her what she was doing, and they would say, "Well, why are you doing that?" And my sister said, "Well, I want to protect this life." They were like, "It's a medical clinic, remember? A medical clinic where doctors have taken an oath?" So actually, I think we never really are fully aware of how we affect others. So people may come up to you many years later and say, "I was really inspired by what you said or what you did on that particular day, or just the fact that you didn't do something or you didn't react." I think I'll close with the best advice I ever got on the day that I ordained. Well, actually, I better back up there. So as we take more precepts, we're actually taking on more responsibility. And so that's a very good thing, because that really helps us make wiser and wiser choices. And then if we eventually do pursue ordination in this life, then obviously we're a neon sign, so that when you're in public, people may wonder what you are and who you represent. And just to be aware, that again, how we walk, how we talk to each other in public is significant. So back to the best advice I ever got on the day I ordained. I'm not sure I asked Venerable Tarpa for advice, but she kindly gave it to me. And she said, "If you really want to know what to do next, just keep your eye on venerable children. And she's the one to pay attention to." And so I've tried my best to do that. I've failed many, many times in missing the mark, but it was excellent advice. And so the advice I can give to all of us that I keep in my heart is that, pay attention to the wise ones, care about what the wise ones think, and be sincere in your practice. And then you don't have to worry about being an example, because you're doing your best.